Number 8. Melissa Cheng and Mindy Dixon. During a nightmare walk in September 2020, a passerby noticed that the lights were on at the St. Peter and Paul Roman Catholic Church in St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana. Out of curiosity, they peered in through a window. Needless to say, the onlooker was shocked by what they saw. The church's priest, Travis Clark, engaging in a highly compromising interaction on the church's altar with two dominatrixes. Clark was allegedly half-dressed while the women were donning corsets and high-heeled boots. The trio was surrounded by an array of items that didn't belong in any church. They also appeared to be filming the encounter using a cell phone on a tripod and portable stage lighting. The horrified onlooker captured footage of the encounter and turned it over to law enforcement. Because the unholy hookup occurred within public view, police arrested Clark and the two dominatrixes for obscenity. During questioning, 23-year-old Melissa Cheng and 41-year-old adult film actress Mindy Dixon said that they were filming role play with Clark. The day before the incident, Dixon reportedly wrote in a social media post that she and another dominatrix were traveling to the New Orleans area to defile a house of God. Both women pleaded guilty to reduced misdemeanor charges and were each sentenced to 2 years of probation. Clark was kicked out of the priesthood shortly after his arrest. He pleaded guilty to felony obscenity and received a 3-year suspended prison sentence, along with 3 years of probation. In addition to being fined $1,000, he was ordered to pay $8,000 in restitution to the church, perhaps to replace the altar that was ritually burned and destroyed. Number 7. Heidi Boss. Stuart Lindsay Heron spent hours lying in wait outside the Melbourne, Australia home of 39-year-old Nicholas Cameron in July of 2021. Armed with a hammer, Heron attacked Cameron when he came outside to walk his dog, leaving the victim fatally injured on the pavement with at least 14 skull fractures. Police arrived just a few minutes later and arrested Heron as he tried fleeing the scene. During questioning, Heron allegedly claimed that he killed Cameron because he saw the victim dealing methamphetamine to kids. But further questioning and investigation revealed that he had been recruited to commit the crime by Cameron's girlfriend, dominatrix Heidi Boss. Cameron had met Boss on a fetish app just 2 months earlier. Going by the name Hedonistic Siren, Boss had established a dominant/submissive relationship with Heron, who went by the nickname Slave Pinto. During their conversations, Boss began to open up about her ill feelings toward Cameron. A few weeks before the murder, she allegedly asked Heron if he could do anything to chase Cameron out of town. Heron agreed to fulfill his mistress's wish and began to stalk Cameron while formulating his plan. After an argument with Cameron, Boss allegedly gave Heron a green light to act and said that she wished she could come and watch. Authorities charged both Heron and Boss with murder. During Heron's court proceedings, the defense placed the entire blame on Boss for manipulating Heron in a way that turned his life upside down. According to Heron's attorney, things only started to go wrong in his life after he met Boss. Despite these claims, Heron pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Boss pleaded guilty to a reduced manslaughter charge for her role in plotting the attack and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Number 6. Erica Jean Freeman. In August 2017, a 25-year-old dominatrix from Fairburn, Georgia, named Erica Jean Freeman, was accused of blackmailing a married client in Detroit whom she had an online affair with. She was known to her fans as Temptress Nirvana. Freeman allegedly spent months playing a cat-and-mouse game with the victim, who sent her compromising photos of himself in exchange for her underwear starting in September 2016. According to the FBI, Freeman began demanding money from the victim in exchange for not telling his wife, family, and friends about their affair or otherwise ruining his reputation. Identified as MS in legal documents, the man claimed that he tried to end the relationship several times but was repeatedly threatened with blackmail. Freeman allegedly harassed the victim from various email and social media accounts, which were all traced to the same address. She was also accused of contacting the man using 6 different cell phones and repeatedly calling his wife. In one voicemail to the victim's wife, a woman could be heard saying, "Your husband has been cheating on you since your honeymoon, and he's also a pervert." Nearly a year after Freeman and MS began corresponding, the FBI arrested Freeman on suspicion of extortion. Unfortunately, though, the outcome of the case is unclear. Number 5. Julie Enright. In July of 2018, a jogger discovered the brutally slain body of a 20-year-old Massachusetts man named Brandon Chiklis along a roadside in Rindge, New Hampshire. The young man's remains were wrapped in a blanket, tarp, and canvas sheet, and his abandoned car was found elsewhere. Investigators traced the crime to the victim's dominatrix ex-girlfriend, 21-year-old Julie Enright, who allegedly stabbed Chiklis to death in a treehouse in Ashburnham as a 20th birthday surprise. Enright initially denied seeing Chiklis on the day of the crime. She later admitted to killing her boyfriend, but claimed she was acting in self-defense. During Enright's trial in 2021, the defense stuck to the young woman's self-defense claim, hoping for a not guilty verdict. Meanwhile, the prosecution pursued a first-degree murder conviction, which would mean that the crime was premeditated. The state described the accused killer of having a fascination with murder and violence and an insatiable curiosity to kill. Text messages from shortly before the murder revealed that Enright told Chiklis not to tell anyone where he was going. Prosecutors claimed that this was because Enright had sinister intentions. But the defense argued that it was because Enright didn't want Chiklis's current girlfriend to know they were meeting up for intimacy. The jury landed in between the outcomes that both sides were aiming for and found Enright guilty of second-degree murder. This means that the crime wasn't necessarily premeditated, but that she also did not act in self-defense. She was sentenced to the harshest allowable penalty of 25 years to life in prison. Number 4. Victoria Nazarova. In one of the more bizarre criminal cases to make national news headlines in recent years, a Russian-born dominatrix was accused of trying to fatally poison her friend with tainted cheesecake in New York City in August 2016. 47-year-old Victoria Nazarova contacted her lookalike victim, Ukrainian-born eyelash stylist Olga Svik, and said she needed an emergency eyelash repair before she left the next day for a vacation to Mexico. It was Svik's day off, but she agreed to make time for Nazarova at her apartment in Queens. Nazarova showed up with cheesecake and insisted Svik try a piece. She obliged and began to feel extremely sick around 20 minutes later. The next day, Svik's neighbor saw Nazarova coming and going from the woman's room. When Svik failed to come out of her room, the neighbor went to check on her and found her passed out and surrounded by pills. The heater was set to high, despite the hot summer weather. Svik was taken to a nearby hospital, where a toxicology test showed no sign of illicit substances in her body. But she was sure that she had been drugged, especially because valuables were missing from her room when she regained consciousness. Her passport and identity documents had also been stolen. While investigating the case, detectives noticed that Nazarova and the victim looked remarkably similar. This led them to suspect that Nazarova was trying to kill Svik with the goal of stealing her identity. Investigators also tested cheesecake crumbs found in Svik's apartment, which were found to contain a potentially lethal sedative called phenazepam. Nazarova's DNA was found on the cheesecake container, further implicating her in the crime. By then, Nazarova was nowhere to be found, but she was eventually tracked down in Brooklyn's Sheepshead Bay neighborhood. Then, in 2018, she was indicted on charges related to the poisoning. Following an 11-day trial in 2023, the jury found Nazarova guilty of attempted murder. She was sentenced to 21 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. She could see freedom in as little as 15 years, but once she serves her time, she'll most likely be deported to Russia to face a murder charge in an unrelated case. Nazarova is also suspected of poisoning a New York man she met on a Russian dating website, but she is not being charged in connection with that case. Number 3. Barbara Asher. 53-year-old Michael Lord of Northampton, New Hampshire, mysteriously vanished in July of 2000. Investigators traced his last known whereabouts to the Quincy, Massachusetts apartment of Barbara Asher, a dominatrix in her early 50s who ran a makeshift dungeon out of her home. During questioning, Asher allegedly admitted that Lord died at her residence. She claimed that Lord had a heart attack while strapped to a medieval contraption. She said that she didn't seek help because she was afraid of what would happen if the authorities discovered how she made her money. Asher also confessed to having her boyfriend dismember Lord's body, which was dumped behind a restaurant in Augusta, Maine. In 2002, more than 2 years after Lord's death, authorities charged her with manslaughter and illegal disposal of a body. But the victim's remains were never found, and Lord's DNA was never recovered from the scene. Interrogators had also failed to record Asher's confession, claiming that she had asked him to turn off the tape recorder before she admitted to her role in the situation. These details were likely factors in the jury's decision to find Asher not guilty of involuntary manslaughter and dismemberment. Lord's son, Timothy Lord, told CBS News that he was disappointed by the verdict, but instead of placing complete blame on the jury, he questioned whether the police had thoroughly investigated the case. The victim's other son, Nathan Lord, questioned why certain evidence wasn't presented during the trial, including the fact that Asher had allegedly called his mother and apologized for her role in Michael's death. Following the not guilty verdict, Asher declined to comment to reporters on whether she was still working as a dominatrix. Number 2. Renee Chignell. In what prosecutors later described as a bondage session gone wrong, 51-year-old cricket umpire Peter Plumley Walker fell unconscious and stopped breathing during a meeting with teenage dominatrix Renee Chignell in 1989. Unsure of how to handle the situation, Chignell consulted her boyfriend, 35-year-old Neville Walker. The couple then threw Plumley Walker into New Zealand's Puka Falls. According to investigators, Chignell and Walker ran a lucrative S&M business out of their townhouse. On the very same day his divorce was finalized, Plumley Walker treated himself to a $200 session, unaware that he was about to lose his life. Following the investigation, Chignell and Walker were both charged with murder and tried together. Their first trial ended in a guilty verdict after prosecutors argued that Plumley Walker was still alive when he was thrown into the water. The couple underwent 2 more trials, during which the defense presented evidence that Plumley Walker was already dead before his body was discarded. Chignell and Walker were ultimately acquitted of the charges, but the case remained steeped in controversy for years to come. In 2018, Chignell opened up about the tragedy in a documentary called Mistress Mercy, the Renee Chignell story. She said that Plumley Walker seemed fine all throughout their session and that she was surprised to find him unresponsive upon returning to the room from a break. According to the version of events put forth by Chignell, both she and Neville attempted to perform life-saving measures on the ailing client, but they were unable to revive him. Looking back, she said she would have immediately called emergency services rather than taking measures to conceal Plumley Walker's death. In hindsight, Chignell described herself as being very naive, very young, very stupid, but she made it clear that she had learned from the experience, which earned her the lasting reputation as the country's most infamous woman. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. The murder of Brittany Kilgore. 22-year-old Brittany Kilgore was living alone in Fallbrook, California in 2012 when she filed for divorce from her U.S. Marine husband, who was serving overseas in Afghanistan at the time. As she packed her belongings with plans to move back to her hometown in Missouri, she received a visit from her neighbor, 45-year-old former Marine Staff Sergeant Louis Ray Perez, whom she had recently befriended. Perez offered to help Kilgore pack if she agreed to go on a dinner cruise with him, but Kilgore initially said no. She knew Perez had a girlfriend, 36-year-old Dorothy Maraglino, and she didn't want to cause any problems. But Brittany needed the help, so she eventually said yes. She was last seen leaving for the date that evening. At around 8 p.m. that night, Kilgore sent a text message to a friend that said help. 4 days later, her murdered body was found in a ditch along a rural roadside. She had been smothered, strangled, shot with a stun gun, and had a rope wrapped around her neck. There was also evidence that the killer had tried to dismember Kilgore's body before disposing of it. Investigators quickly traced the crime to Perez and paid a visit to the home he shared with Maraglino and a third roommate, 25-year-old Jessica Lopez. They were surprised to discover that the home doubled as an S&M dungeon and that the trio of roommates were in a dominant-submissive arrangement with one another. Perez acted as the dominant of the household, while Maraglino was the household mistress and Lopez was their slave. According to prosecutors, Perez had lured an unsuspecting Kilgore to the residence where he, Maraglino, and Lopez tortured the victim to death for their own sadistic pleasure. There was no evidence to suggest that Kilgore was aware of the nature of her neighbor's relationship, or that she herself was a participant. Lopez initially took credit for the murder, but after examining the evidence and the dynamic she played in the trio's lifestyle, authorities determined that she wasn't the only person involved. And while Perez initially claimed he had dropped Kilgore off at a bar in downtown San Diego, phone data put the victim at the suspect's residence at the exact time of her murder. In 2015, all 3 suspects were found guilty of Kilgore's murder and were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 10. Lauren Pazienza. In early 2022, 87-year-old singing coach Barbara Maya Guston was waiting for a taxi to go see one of her students perform in Manhattan when someone charged at her from behind and shoved her for no apparent reason. She fell to the ground and smacked her head against the pavement, leaving her with a large gash. While waiting for emergency responders, Guston told a friend that she had never been hit so hard in her life. Police arrived just in time to get a description of the attacker before she fell unconscious. She was rushed to the hospital, where she was treated for brain trauma, but she died from her injuries. 2 weeks later, a 26-year-old woman named Lauren Pazienza turned herself in and was charged with manslaughter. The suspect's motives for randomly attacking an elderly stranger out of nowhere remain unclear. Pazienza's lawyer, Arthur A. Dalla, told the Daily Mail that his client is a good person who's being accused of something awful and that she's devastated by the ordeal. But past acquaintances described her as violence-prone, emotionally unstable, and dangerous. Prosecutors claim that Pazienza was upset on the night of the tragedy because the park she was at with her fiancé was closing and she didn't want to leave. She remains behind bars without bail while the case plays out in court. Number 9. Disgruntled Vatican tourist. During a visit to the Vatican in 2022, a 65-year-old American tourist allegedly began smashing sculptures when he learned that he couldn't meet the Pope. It all started when he demanded to see the head of the Catholic Church and was told that his request couldn't be granted. He reportedly stomped off in a fit of rage, grabbed a bust lining the wall of the Chiaramonti Museum and smashed it to the floor. The man was accused of damaging at least 2 busts by the time authorities intervened on the explosive tantrum and stopped him from causing more harm. He was charged with aggravated damage. Luckily, the damage wasn't extensive, and the busts were deemed fixable. One bust lost part of its nose and ear, while the other came off its pedestal, according to Vatican Museum spokesman Matteo Alessandrini, who spoke with CNN. But repairing them would come at an estimated cost of $14,800 and would take around 300 hours of labor, all thanks to an unhinged tourist's hissy fit. Number 8. Tara Palmer Tompkinson. When she noticed people taking pictures of her at London's Heathrow Airport in 2014, English socialite Tara Palmer Tompkinson became visibly upset. She would later claim that bystanders began to mock her and that she lost her temper when a man supposedly told her that she wasn't fit to travel because she was crying. Others reported that Palmer Tompkinson threw a tantrum because she was denied access into the first-class lounge. Regardless of the reasons, the fact that the socialite flew into a rage is undeniable because it was captured on camera. In the video, bystanders could be heard describing Palmer Tompkinson as ballistic as she argued with the police. At one point, she got so angry that she ripped out a handful of her hair extensions and threw them at the officers. She then threw her coat and tried to run while screaming one last insult, but the police stopped her. It took 8 officers to get the situation under control, and the former model was taken into custody, sobbing and screaming. Palmer Tompkinson claimed that she wasn't drinking during the incident, but that her outburst was triggered by an anxiety attack. It makes sense given her history of struggling with both substance abuse and debilitating anxiety, which at one point turned her into a recluse who barely left her home. She also denied rumors that she had been charged with disorderly conduct and claimed that she was let off with a warning. Number 7. Michaela Tackett. 18-year-old Michaela R. Tackett was working at an Arby's restaurant in Sharonville, Ohio, when she allegedly threw a colossal tantrum during her shift. It all started with name-calling when she had a disagreement with her boss, Sierra McQuarrie. The chaos eventually escalated into Tackett grabbing a fryer filled with boiling grease and fries and using it to throw fries at other workers, according to police reports. She was also accused of smashing a telephone onto the floor, threatening to wreck the manager's car, and threatening to slap other employees in the face before fleeing the restaurant. After Tackett left the scene, the police called her on the phone to inform her that she was fired and warned her not to return to Arby's or contact anyone there. They also told her that she was facing charges of disorderly conduct and criminal damage. Minutes later, an Arby's employee received a message from Tackett stating, "I got you." The worker called the police and told them that she was afraid of the suspect. Tackett admitted becoming angry with her co-workers and breaking a phone in the store, but denied threatening anyone. In an interview with local station WCPO, she said that she felt like people thought she was a bad person when she wasn't, and that she was nervous because she had never been in a situation like the one she was in. Number 6. Malik McDowell. Malik McDowell's first official year as an NFL pro got off to a bad start when he got into an ATV accident and was unable to play in the 2017 season due to a concussion. Things took an even worse turn a few months later when he allegedly threw a tantrum at a nightclub outside Atlanta in Chamblee, Georgia. Bouncers at the club said that McDowell accused them of stealing his money after he paid the valet $600 to park his car. According to staff, the club only took payment inside, and McDowell's parking bill had not yet been settled. They let him come back into the club, but kicked him out when he poured 2 bottles of alcohol into a bucket of ice. At that point, police were called to the scene, where they reportedly struggled with the 6'6", 198-centimeter athlete as he yelled at officers. A police report claimed that McDowell threw himself onto the ground in a fit of rage and that he accused an officer of stealing his money while searching him. McDowell and his friend were charged with disorderly conduct and were released on bond. Over the years, he's faced numerous criminal allegations, including DUI, assault, resisting arrest, and more. He spent a year in prison before returning to the NFL, but only played for 1 season before running into trouble again. In early 2022, police in Boca Raton, Florida, responded to a call about a man walking around naked in public and charged McDowell with public exposure, aggravated battery of an officer, and resisting arrest. Number 5. Melissa Rancourt. When staff members at the Espanola Recreation Centre in Ontario asked Greater Sudbury Police Constable Melissa Rancourt for proof of her COVID vaccination in 2021, she allegedly reacted explosively. The off-duty policewoman was there to attend a children's hockey game, but she never ended up seeing it because she was too busy getting arrested for her tirade. She was accused of calling staff members Nazis, kicking a door and arguing with a provincial police officer who was called to the scene to deal with her outburst. Rancourt initially denied calling the rec center employees Nazis, despite numerous witnesses alleging otherwise. Authorities charged her with resisting a peace officer and entering a premises when entry has been prohibited. She was subjected to a disciplinary hearing during which her anti-vax Facebook posts were brought up as a concerning factor in her behavior. It was also revealed that her superiors at the Greater Sudbury Police Department had cautioned her about her controversial social media use. One post from the day before Rancourt was arrested stated her plans to attend a hockey game and that she would not be disclosing her and her kids' private medical information. The opposing lawyer, Joël Dubois, argued that the post demonstrates premeditation and intent. Rancourt was put on administrative duties following the incident and attended a sensitivity class to learn more about the use of Holocaust terms like Nazi, which she admitted in court to using. She also formally apologized. According to the last update, her criminal charges were withdrawn and she was facing a disciplinary penalty ranging from forfeiting 2 days' worth of pay to being demoted. Number 4. Amanda Napier. In April of 2022, police were called to a hospital in East Kilbride, Scotland, over a disturbance involving a woman who was in the throes of a temper tantrum. Staff members told officers that 45-year-old Amanda Napier originally came in for treatment of a toe injury, but soon began to act disruptive. She was accused of throwing her glasses around the waiting room and barging into a treatment room where doctors were with another patient. When employees tried getting her to leave, she allegedly threw herself on the floor. Police arrived to find Napier rolling about the floor like a child and yelling obscenities when an officer tried to calm her down, according to prosecutor Abby Seal. Someone told her to stop yelling and that there were children in the waiting room, to which she reportedly replied, "I don't give a F." Napier proceeded to kick her shoe off and throw her phone before lunging at a policewoman and biting her arm. She was accused of similar behavior in a previous incident when paramedics found her intoxicated and bleeding in the street and tried to help her. After the hospital incident, the judge sentenced Napier to 18 months of probation and sternly warned her that this was her last chance before she suffers more serious legal consequences for her behavior. Number 3. Tyler Cole Hutton. During criminal court proceedings in Baxter County, Arkansas in July of 2021, officers overheard some commotion coming from an area where inmates are held while they await their hearings. They ran back into the room and found 28-year-old Tyler Cole Hutton attacking a deputy and yelling obscenities. It was similar to another incident that happened just 2 months earlier, when Hutton just snapped, in the words of one deputy. During the second attack, Hutton reportedly exploded after demanding that the charges from the first incident be dropped and not getting his wish. Hutton originally wound up in court on a domestic battery charge for allegedly attacking the mother of his daughter. After the first court outburst, he was charged with battery on a police officer, impairing the operation of a vital public facility, and disorderly conduct. The second incident brought additional charges, including felony battery on a police officer and, once again, impairing the operation of a vital public facility and misdemeanor disorderly conduct. Hutton remained calm during his next court hearing, during which he pleaded guilty in all 3 of the cases against him. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in prison. He applied for parole in May of 2022 and was denied. Number 2. Luke Vincent Gatti. Luke Vincent Gatti went viral in 2015 over a highly unflattering drunken tirade that was captured on camera when he was denied bacon jalapeno mac and cheese. The 19-year-old former University of Connecticut student was trying to order the dish at the Union Street Market, but an employee noticed that he was drinking alcohol, which isn't permitted there, and asked him to leave. Footage of the incident, recorded by a bystander, shows Gatti refusing to leave despite the workers' repeated requests before he devolves into verbally abusing the staff. He mocked the manager's job position, referred to the manager using a homophobic slang term, and made other belligerent remarks. Gatti shoved the manager several times before being restrained by other employees while they waited for police to arrive. Authorities charged him with breach of peace and criminal trespass after the video of the encounter went viral, earning him the nickname of Mac and Cheese Douche. Gatti made a YouTube video apologizing for his cringeworthy behavior. He acknowledged that he acted unacceptably and promised that he was working on addressing his obvious issues. The judge overseeing the case apparently agreed and ordered him to attend a substance abuse program. But this wasn't Gatti's first arrest for treating people badly, and it wouldn't be his last. About a year before the mac and cheese incident, he was charged with disorderly conduct in 2 separate incidents, during one of which he allegedly hurled a racial insult at another UConn student. Then, in June of 2016, less than a year after the mac and cheese incident, police in Boca Raton, Florida, charged Gatti with battery on an officer and resisting an officer with violence. The incident reportedly happened after Gatti fled from a rehab facility, and police were trying to take him into custody under Florida's Baker Act, which enables concerned parties to have someone temporarily institutionalized out of a concern for their mental health. Number 1. Kylie Dippery. Police officers were patrolling in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware one night in 2019 when they heard a woman screaming. They found her and identified her as a 22-year-old Pennsylvania resident, Kylie Dippery, and learned that she had been separated from her boyfriend. Officers guided her back to her hotel room, where she was reunited with the man. They found themselves back at the scene just a few minutes later when the woman once again began to scream loudly. She allegedly refused to quiet down and had alarmed several other hotel guests. Dippery was arrested and escorted to the police vehicle, during which time she became combative. She kicked an officer while they struggled to get her into the vehicle, then vomited in the vehicle, and both vomited and urinated at the police Police Department. Authorities charged Dippery with resisting arrest with force or violence, offensive touching of a law enforcement officer, disorderly conduct, and more. Thanks for watching. Would you rather date a dominatrix or someone who is more submissive? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.